We're Nick Lombardino and Zach Blumenfeld, co-founders of CultureCon. Welcome to a special series on the CultureCon podcast, Culture Starts Here.
This content series is brought to you in partnership with our friends at ADVISA, a Midwest-based consultancy helping CEOs, HR leaders, and managers transform workplace culture.
In each episode, ADVISA CEO Heather Haas and leadership consultant BJ McKay dive into practical ways to initiate and sustain the culture you need to drive growth and success at your organization.
The Culture Starts Here series starts now.
All right. Welcome to Culture Starts Here. This is a special series on the CultureCon podcast. I am BJ McKay, a leadership consultant with ADVISA, and I'm here with our amazing CEO, Heather Haas.
Hello, BJ. Glad to be with you again.
Awesome. So on Culture Starts Here, last time we discussed the Atlas framework. It's essentially the arc that we're going to be following over the course of our time here on the CultureCon podcast. And it's that framework for how to build a competitive culture. So for anybody that didn't hear our last episode, Heather, they're starting here. Hey, I got this one. I want to check it out. Just talk to us a little bit about what is Atlas, what does it stand for, and why is it important to organizations?
Yeah, quick story on the acronym Atlas. I was reflecting on this recently. I don't know who's my age or if you're younger than me, BJ, but I remember my dad having a Rand McNally Atlas, a physical big book with a map of every state. My dad was a traveling insurance salesman, so I have vivid memories of being a child and seeing him on Sunday nights pull out the Atlas, and I would sit on his lap and he would show me, where he was going to be driving, where he was going to be going. I also have memories of being on road trips with our family where, you get lost and, mom is saying, stop and ask somebody. And my dad would say, Heather, hand me the Atlas, because he wanted to find it. But that kind of has always stuck with me because I've always been someone who likes maps. I like understanding where am I going, and how do I get there? And so in terms of that framework for creating cultural competitive advantage, Atlas emerged for me as a great both metaphor for the how to get from where you are culturally to where you want to be. But also, as you know, a framework is just a way to take something complex and give you a way to talk about it, a shared language. So that's kind of the origin story of why that acronym and what are the 5 drivers. The A is activation from above. We've talked about the importance of the executive team being materially invested in creating a culture that attracts and keeps the best and brightest people because it's important to achieving business goals. So where people at the top of an organization are investing their time, attention, and budget, keeping tabs on the culture of the organization, that's really important. The T we're going to talk about today is trust and shared purpose. So I'll kind of hold on that because we're going to unpack that in great detail. The L is leader effectiveness. Leaders need to know what to say and do in order to activate the intentional culture. And they need customized learning experiences where they have the time and space to develop new skills and tools to lead in new ways. The second A is actionable people data. So behavioral information about how their employees are wired, employee engagement information, those kinds of data sets are super important for leaders to know how to prioritize people initiatives and to have a gauge on how are we doing as an organization in terms of creating a healthy, vibrant, productive work environment. And then finally, the S is systems. We've got to have software and platforms, policies, procedures, and norms. All of those structural things need to be aligned with the type of culture and work environment that we're trying to create. So those 5 things, really, it gave us a way to put our point of view about culture and the important role that leaders play in carrying that culture. It gave us a way to kind of orient ourselves, again, thinking of that old Rand McNally Atlas that none of our kids will even know what that is because we have maps in our hand, in our phone every day.
Well, I have one in the back of my Toyota Land Cruiser. And it's like, maybe it's like the doomsday prepper in me that I'm like, well, if my phone goes out, at least I got this thing back here and I'll be able to find it in the back. I threw one in all my kids' cars. I'm just going to be becoming that dad. I
You're
think.
that dad.
What's this doing? Just put it in the trunk. Just maybe, I hope you never need it. I hope you never need it, but keep it. Well, thanks for the recap, Heather. And as you engage with us, we're going to talk about a client example today, which hopefully will be enlightening and informative for clients as well. But frameworks, there's a million of them. It's all about like application. And then can we assess against these things as we're taking action? Is the change happening there before? And we're going to talk about that a bit today. So last time, as you shared, we talked about activation from above. So if someone wants to hear that unpacked in terms of engaging that senior team into their role and responsibility of creating culture, please check it out. But today we're going into a second driver, which is trust and shared purpose. So Heather, I wanted you to lead off with, we use the label trust and shared purpose for this success driver for a competitive culture. So what exactly is that referring to?
It's referring to the fact that people need to understand the mission. What's our reason for existence? What value do we bring into the world? The vision, where are we headed? Where are we going? And values. What's our corporate character? What are the mindsets and behaviors that illuminate the type of company that we want to be, the way we want to treat each other, the way we want to treat our customers? So mission, vision, values, people knowing what those things are is super important to culture, because culture needs to have a spine. It needs to have something to hook into. It can't just be off on the side. So this second driver is really our saying that if you don't have a strategic plan where you have been really explicit about, here's our mission, this is what we are here to do, and here is the vision, here's where we're going, and that's compelling and exciting for these ways, and that these are the values that represent who we want to be as we go together toward that mission. It's so essential, because once those things are clear for employees, now people have a context. And this is where the trust comes in. If I know who we are and I know where we're going, in other words, I can trust that leaders have a game plan. They have my best interests in mind. And I can trust that the decisions that they're making and the priorities that I see kind of flow out of, goals and objectives, I can emotionally commit to those things because I understand who we are, where we're going, and why it's important. Sometimes those things are fuzzy. In some organizations we work with, they haven't articulated a compelling vision for the future. And we always say, if you haven't done that yet, it's super helpful for any kind of cultural work that we may want to do, because it's way easier to create a work environment that is in service of those, what I call the important things, mission, vision, values.
I'm going to unpack this a little bit. So if I'm listening to this, I might be nodding my head like trust. Gosh, that's where I think we're breaking down. We have like half of the leadership or supervisors operate this way. They're in this kind of legacy mindset. We have some in the middle that kind of don't know which tack they're on. And then we have other people that seem to be gung-ho, but it seems kind of like fractured. And yeah, we have the mission vision. Like we did that work last year and it's on the walls. They did all these things. So it's like they're not at the very beginning. Like they have some of the stuff, but they're not seeing the kind of culture unilaterally in an organization. And if I'm here in one of those leadership roles, or maybe I'm in an HR leadership role, like what type of questions might you ask me, or what might I start diving into and pulling at to try to attack that trust gap that I perceive with my team?
Well, trust is a very kind of complex thing. I mean, there's trust that comes from what I would call character trust, where people look up at the leaders and other people that they work with, and they say, these are good people. These are people. They're not lying. They're not cheating. They're not stealing. These people have good character. So you can have trust on that level. There's also a level of trust that is what I would call competence trust. So you look up at leadership and you go, yeah, do these people know what they're doing? are they making the right calls, the right business decisions? And I can see evidence that as they evolve the company and make investments, I can see evidence that these things tend to pan out. And when they don't pan out, there's learning that comes from it and explanation. So, I mean, leaders have to be competent for people to trust them. And then there's a third component of trust that is what I would call communication trust. And that's, I think, what gets really relevant to this conversation that we're having about culture. Because for people to hook into the mission, the vision, the values of the organization, we have to be talking about those things frequently. And we have to be highlighting examples. We have to be using, our mission and our vision and our values. We have to be using those things as decision-making filters, because they are the important things, like the true north. So, how do we know in an organization if trust and shared purpose are alive and well? We start to ask some questions around, hey, where's the organization heading? And how much confidence do you have in leadership that they are doing the right things to prosper the organization and take care of the people who bring all the value to customers day to day? If employees are at all fuzzy on that, or they're not sure, they start to hold back effort and they're more guarded. The culture effort that HR in particular might try to put forward is sort of fractured, and it can't reach its potential because people can't lean in all the way. That's what trust will give you. And if you think about that, even in a personal relationship or even in your organization, if leadership makes a change, or if your partner says, I don't have all this figured out, but just come with me on this. If you trust them and you have a history of, he's generally had my back and said and done things that ended up working out, you're more likely to give the benefit of the doubt and to come along. And that's why it's so critical. Trust and shared purpose is it's power and it's energy.
I have two tributaries to take this down. I might forget the second one, but hopefully it comes back to me. The first one is pretty tangible, and it might be just a highlighter, if you will. If you can think of maybe like a top 1, 2, or 3, like if I wanted to just destroy trust at any one of those levels, like be it competence trust, be it character trust, be it communication trust, what are some like warning signs or things that you see that it really doesn't matter what your mission, vision, and values are, because the trust part is gone, even if the shared purpose might be there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Trust starts to get diminished when what we say doesn't match what we do. So, for example, if someone that you work with says, we're partners, this is a partnership, but then the decisions that they make are one-sided, and the decisions that they make are not consistent with doing positive and helpful things on your side of the ledger, that's when you start to go, oh, hold on a second. You're saying we're partners, and then everything you do doesn't positively impact me or doesn't feel like a 50-50, we're in this together. That's when you start to distrust. So, our actions either put deposits in the trust bank over time, or actions can be withdrawals. Like, I'm backing up because I'm afraid I now have to kind of watch my back, and I'm afraid to give my full self emotionally, intellectually to this organization because I'm not sure that there's a game plan and a strategy here. I'm also not sure that the leadership values me or values the impact of the employees who make this place go round.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because what I've seen, and we might unpack this just a little bit in a few minutes when we talk about a client example that I worked with for the last decade, is making that material to leaders that don't seem to be shaken out. Like you demonstrated this. Hey, this is, I think, where the gap is, but you can't really click into them. Like what you just shared, Heather, helps me when I'm looking at that as like a lens to look at it. I see inertia, slower communication, Like the discretionary effort is zero, because what use is it? What use is it for me to provide more effort? So when you think about engagement, which could be looked at overbroad, the cost of not having people engaged or trusting the people they work with is everything happens slower. So think if you're running a sales team, how's that line up with the quarterly goals that you have? If you're running an operations team, what's the backlog start to look like with how you start to work? Well, how is this connected to culture? Like what you're just saying seems to be a gap that's causing a lot of like business strategy and business results problems.
Yeah, I mean, there's a book called The Speed of Trust that is all about the science and the implications when trust is present, when trust is not present. But essentially, when trust is present, things get done faster, which is what you were just alluding to, and at a lower cost. So there is a bottom line impact of trust. If employees are fully committed, they're not just complying with what they're being asked to do, but they are emotionally committed to the mission, the vision, and the values of the organization, you are going to go further and go faster. And that drops more money to the bottom line without question.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Well, let's turn a little bit. Let's dial into an actual client example. Heather and I were rapping before the podcast about a client example might be helpful if you're listening. But how does it happen? How does trust and shared beliefs come along? We've done the mission, vision, values work. How long does it take? What should I do? If you're looking for like the nitty gritty on that, we thought it'd be great to just share an example that isn't a 2-week example or even a 2-year example. And it comes from my client base. So Heather's going to play the role today of consultant with me here as well. And I'm going to basically present this case study. We're going to see how this flows. And then we're going to wrap up. Heather, I'm going to challenge you with this to leave you with kind of the punch card. As we go through this example, how might these things connect back to your organization, regardless of size? If it happens to fit the same kind of market category, then bonus for you. Thanks for listening. If not, hopefully Heather will draw it at the end, kind of the main aspects of maybe what happened in there that's getting the ship moved in the right direction. So you game, Heather?
I'm game. I mean, and I know I've worked with you for a long time, so I've watched you be the consultant who created the space and provided the guidance for them to come along over the better part of a decade. So BJ, why don't you share, just generally, what was the organization, what industry were they in, and sort of what was the presenting problem that you first were engaged by them to come in and help solve?
Okay, great. So this organization, kind of the anatomy of the organization, is about a 1,500 person healthcare technology organization. It's kind of a hybrid environment. There's on-premises things that they do, geographically distributed in and around the Midwest. So they have 17 to 20 different locations and spots where people are working. And the leadership all essentially lives and works in one location. And then there's like a distribution of people in different areas at like supervisory levels down chain in the organization. It's been around for, I think it's probably a 50-year plus organization that's been around.
History.
And then we were drawn in. Where did we come in? Is they were looking to get data points because they were experiencing massive turnover.
Okay.
In the front line of their organization. And they were trying to uncover, why might this be happening? What can we do about it? Even if we're in and around industry standard or maybe slightly above. I mean, 67 to 70% turnover in a year is super expensive. And they were feeling that. And the recruiting, talent management, talent acquisition side of the house was feeling a ton of pressure to make some changes to figure out how to stem the bleeding.
Okay. And so you come in, we need some data. We need to shine a light on this turnover problem. It's expenses. And our talent acquisition folks are burned out, is what it sounded like. So how did you come around to this trust and shared purpose piece of the puzzle? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into a turnover problem, but germane to what we're talking about today, what did you learn about the important things at the top?
It was really an overnight success. I mean, it only took 8 years. So if you're listening to this, like, I've been trying, it's like, hey, don't give up. What started happening was the data you're looking, as you look at data, you try to attach the context to it. in and by itself. No one from the outside is going to come and tell you, oh, here's why that's happening. I mean, you need to really tie in the organizational arc. Who are the people that are making these decisions doing it?
Real fast, the data. So you had predictive index data, of course, that
Engagement survey data.
And was our leadership and culture assessment in place at the time when you started with that? Probably not. Yeah. So those were the two data sets. You had information about how people were wired, including the leadership team, their innate drives, and then resulting behaviors that cast a shadow on the organization. And then you also had that rich mosaic of engagement information so that you can see where are the hot spots, where are people engaged, where are they not, and then back to what you were saying about context.
And robust comments at the end of engagement surveys, like pages and pages of emotionally powered feedback on what people were experiencing. And honestly, that part, like dialing this back into trust and shared beliefs, as we started bringing and unpacking this, the only person that wasn't showing up to debrief and to look at the information was the CEO.
Okay.
So go back to our last episode. If you're looking at our Atlas framework, our activation from the top is already getting stymied. So, hey, when is so-and-so going to show up? Like, when's she going to be here? Is she going to, like, how does she look? And like she delegates, this is their responsibility. And I already got a red flag.
Yeah, because as you know, that's a point of failure. It's like, okay, we've been brought in to help them with their culture, but we know we need activation from the top. We're not getting it. So now you're moving on to trust and shared purpose.
And now when we got to trust and shared purpose, what we saw was an infighting, a silent infighting, we'll call it, amidst the leadership team, almost like passive aggressive. Because that presence wasn't there, what we were seeing was essentially there was probably 9 core functions that all had their lead that was at the C level. So it was a little bit different. And they were all running their silos as if it was a separate business.
Okay.
But yet they're like, we're integrated. Everybody's talking to each other. Like we work at the customer level. And what I was experiencing and what my teammates there in the executive level of the human resources and the people management side of the house, they were experiencing that rub of all of these silos everywhere. And everyone infighting to protect their budget, their turf, their people. So it was about 9 fiefdom managers. And they were, every meeting was, if you've ever in a meeting and you felt like this feels a little weird, this feels a little confrontational, it doesn't feel like we're really talking to each other. That was the meeting.
Yeah, because what's missing is people were not all aligned with a greater good. The overall, hey, we might disagree on how we get things done. We might disagree on how to parse out the budget. But where people are all at least on the same sheet of music about what we're here to do, why it's important, and where we're going, it sounds like that's what was missing. And it really does start to get in the way of making change.
Yeah. And here's the frustrating part that if you're listening to this, you'll nod your head vigorously at. We tried to make that case. And what happened was they wanted to do training for 3 levels down for leaders. So they're trained in how to better understand the data, all the people out there, we want to really push it out to make sure that they're getting things. And it got better for some, but the problem still remained with not 1 layer of leadership above them, but 2 layers of leadership. We're getting no development. There was no demand for change. There was no demand to win back that trust like you shared earlier on the behavior. So the results didn't change very much, but they did a ton of training. Look what I did. I got the budget for it. We did all the training and I kept going back and looking. I'm holding up a sheet of paper if you're just listening. Here's all the numbers again. And look, it's the same managers and the same functional leads on all of these that are getting the same poor scores. So what started to show up, Heather, was it started to get more green in terms of employee experience down chain. But immediately above that, they still had the manager turnover and it was red. And the worst rated organization, to the point we had to pull it out of the data when we were sharing with the organization, was between the executive team and the next level down. It was just, and it got a little bit better as it went down, but right there, I just kept going. I'm like, all right. By the way, I'll caveat this. This was through 1 VP of HR, and I'm into the middle of tenure of the 2nd VP of HR, still working to solve at that top level.
Absolutely. And any time you're trying to create a culture of engagement or whatever kind of culture you're doing where people can't connect into, hook onto, that's why I said at the outset, culture's got to have a spine. You've got to have those important things in place, and you've got to have all the leaders on the same page about mission, vision, values, so that the rest of the things can flow downstream and be aligned. But I would also point out, I mean, what you're describing about the data and the middle being the place where those middle managers and the relationship between executive team and that next level being the most fractured. In our experience of doing this for nearly 40 years, that's common. You know, you can get some people at the front lines that are doing heroic things to keep the people on the front lines engaged. But often the hardest work is at the top. And then how the people at the top are creating and building trust with those leaders in the middle. And that's so vital, because as we think about succession planning, the people you would hope to promote as executive level leaders look to exit come from the middle. And so for an organization, your client, let's get to the good part. After you pointed this out, you shined a light on, here's where the challenges are. How did you get that group at the top to galvanize around a shared meaning?
Enter our third VP of HR at this point. And we're still doing the training. We're still doing optically, it looks like on the outside, look, we're doing the stuff and we're still not seeing the results, where we still have this problem. We finally got to a point where there was a new CEO came in. And I just saw an opening, because I was sitting there like, man, I'm just in a weak position to help you where you're at. Like, this is what you'll need to do for the time being, even though it's like driving a car that can go 100 miles an hour, but like, hey, how slow can you drive this? You're like, that just doesn't feel good. So we had a new opening. The CEO, she showed up. She started showing up to things. I'm like, all right, this is a positive sign. Was willing to meet, was willing to talk about it, was willing to engage. So that, Heather, is where we started the leadership and culture assessment and the diagnose and define process, where this is the framework, the structure to have the very, very vulnerable and difficult conversations that start to unpack what's going on beneath the surface of that iceberg.
Oh my gosh, the vulnerability. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's the other thing that can really unlock the capacity for trust building. To get a senior leader who can say, some of this is our fault. Some of this is my fault. And I can see what you all are sharing in the data, and I am willing to acknowledge that some of the changes we need to make start with me. That's where now you have people's attention in a whole new way. We're not ignoring it, and we're not sort of painting it with a positive or insincere brush. We're actually owning it. And that's where the bedrock of trust can start to build up from there.
And the biggest investment that they made at this stage of the game, and we're still working through the next, so I can kind of close the story here where we're at. They've now spent over 10 hours together and facilitated conversations directed. They've refreshed and revitalized their mission. They've refined their values to 7 that look great on paper to 4 core. They've taken those 4 core values and they've rolled those out into behavioral competencies and leadership capabilities that now I know what great leadership looks like under the auspices of these values. So there's some clarity that started to emerge. And the feedback we started getting from this team is it wasn't negative about the change. It was like, it feels so refreshing to realize everyone else on this team was struggling the same way and to see each other as human beings. And I knew, like, with me working with that VP, I'm HR, I'm like, we're on new ground right now. We're on new ground. And now they're at the moment now, they all agreed, hey, we want to see something. And we believe the first stage of development is to keep this going with this executive team. So it finally flipped upside down where they realized if we can't demonstrate this, like you shared earlier, we can't do it. And that's what they're debating right now. Should we do it? Should we not do it? So it's still kind of on the table. So maybe in a future podcast, we'll hear how the story ends. Will it be a fairy tale? Or will we kind of stop at the gates right there? But they're right there with this cultural transition at this next pivotal step as they're rolling out.
Wow. I love that you unpack that, because sometimes I think it's easy to listen and read about and think about the Atlas framework. And intellectually, we can all go, yeah, those 5 things make sense. But to bring it to life in the reality of real human beings within an organization and all of the challenges that transformation work can bring, I think is I think it's probably really reassuring for people listening. Like, okay, I'm not the only one. That sounds like our organization or some of the pitfalls we've fallen into over the years.
Excellent. So I'm going to take the mic back. I'm
Yep.
me, you're you. Okay. We're out of that little sequence. So for the folks listening, if you can give like 2 or 3 like punch cards, like in that story or even outside of that, like what are the 3 things maybe I should be looking at to like start evaluating these things or tactics that I can maybe use right away in my role to start to unpack this trust and shared beliefs on my team?
Well, I mean, the easiest thing to do is ask yourself, whatever role you're at, do I know what the mission, vision, and values of the organization is? That's a yes, no. And if you don't, there's some kind of breakdown. Hopefully you can inquire and learn about it. If you're more senior in the organization, the question I would encourage you to ask yourself is our mission inspiring? Is the way that we talk about who we are and what we do and for whom, does that, capture people's hearts and minds? And I mean, you can have an inspiring mission. You don't have to be like saving lives. I think all work is noble work. It's largely about how you talk about it. So just kind of take stock. Do we have a mission? Do we have a vision? Do we have values? Is the mission in particular inspiring? Is the vision clear and action oriented? And does it motivate people to want to come along and create the future? So asking at that level, I think, as it relates to values, one of the most practical things is to say, have they been unpacked in behavioral terms? Because a lot of times organizations have core values that hang on the wall, teamwork, integrity, innovation, whatever those things. But what does innovation really look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? So that can be a very practical takeaway, is just to grab onto your values and do a little exercise of asking, do we all know what these really mean? And can we define them in more specific and explicit ways? Because once you've got behavioral clarity about those core values, now people can personify that. You can coach to those behaviors. You can hold people accountable to those behaviors. You can recruit with a level of clarity and specificity that you weren't able to before, to make sure that potential employees' personal values align and match the kind of work environment we're trying to create. So it's just kind of that taking stock. Do we have those things? If we do, are they alive and well? Do they need to be refreshed? And then I think the other piece, if you do have mission, vision, values, the trust starts to become real with people when those things are ritualized. We work our values into performance management. It's not enough to just hit your goal. You also have to behave in ways that are consistent with our values. What we recognize, today, this morning, BJ, you and I were on our all hands meeting. And, we had a whole segment of our meeting where we were passing a trophy, if you will, from one person to the next of who is personifying our 3 core values. So that's just an example of a ritual that reinforces the importance of those things. And then, of course, the accountability, like I said, job descriptions, performance reviews, onboarding, company and team meetings where we're educating and celebrating the things that we want to see ongoing from our employees.
Thank you, Heather. So really piecing out the mission, vision, values. What's the real meaning behind these? And are they prescriptive? Are they clear? Are they those things? Second piece is like devolving those, if you will, down into actionable rituals. Things that aren't like high energy intensity, but they're frequently can get put in there to really unpack and make sure that they're really alive. And you talked about like the trophies today. And then accountability, even at like that performance management level. Our leaders down chain talking about these and then rewarding these and then developing around these.
Yeah. One of the things too related to that, we talk about reach and frequency. When you're trying to help employees lean in and trust, you've got to talk about it a lot. And you got to talk about it at all levels. If you're talking about these things, it's got to reach all the way to that frontline person. And just like, when you play a game of telephone, the message can get diluted as you go away from the original speaker. You got to remember that with this. You've got to have that reach, and you got to talk about it frequently enough that people really start to internalize it and believe it because it's not going away. It's real because we're living it out and recognizing it.
Well, let's land the plane here, because in our previous episodes, we talked about a tool that we developed. It helps people get a feel for how their culture is doing today. So if you're like, hey, I'm resonating with this, where might be a good place where I can start that's kind of a light lift, that's not going to cost me anything, but might, shed some light on things about where the greatest opportunities are. So can you remind our listener about that tool and what it could do for them?
Yeah, I mean, our website, ADVISA.com, there's a culture check right there on the homepage. So it's a very short 5-minute survey, 25 questions about the 5 drivers, ATLAS, 5 questions for each of those. And it'll give you really fast feedback. Here's where we're strong. Here's where we have an opportunity to improve. You get those results immediately. And I always like to say the value of having that fast feedback is that it helps you elevate the conversation. It helps you talk to someone else about this whole notion of culture change. So my hope is that people will find that valuable. And of course, we're here to support and help if when you get that data, you want someone to talk through it, or you want to go deeper and do a more, intensive data collection, be it an engagement survey or our full leadership and culture assessment. And that's really that diagnosing, like you were talking about earlier, where are we and how can we make some improvements over time?
Wonderful. Advisa.com. That's with a V, not a B. ADVISA. And it's 5-minute culture check. Do it. It's free. It's informative. And like Heather shared, if you have questions about results, there's plenty of us here at Advisa that'd be more than happy to help you unpack that and how might you use that in a meeting and start having these questions with your team. So until next time, I'm BJ McKay.
I'm Heather Haas.
And culture
starts here.
That's a wrap on this episode of the official CultureCon podcast.
If you got something out of it, share it with a friend, teammate, or fellow culture geek.
And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Until next time.